Okay, well, why don't we start with a little choir practice, all right? If you know this, join me in singing a little song, okay? Last night I had the strangest dream I ever had before. I dreamed that they had all agreed to put an end to war. They gathered in a mighty room. The room was filled with them. The paper they were signing said, "We'll never fight again." And after all the papers were signed and 1,000,000 copies made, they all knelt down and bowed their heads, and grateful prayers were prayed. And the people in the streets below were dancing round and round, and swords and guns and uniforms were scattered on the ground. Last night I had the strangest dream I ever had before. I dreamed that they had all agreed to put an end to war. Gracias. First time I was singing that, we were in front of the White House. It was about 1965, and it would give you we had the impression that we must be the devil, because people were coming by and swearing at us and so on. And it's very interesting to see what a militarized culture we live in. There's just almost a reverence for militarism. But the subject today is liberation theology. And that goes back to Moses. And Moses had the attitude that a God that is a true God liberates and does not enslave. And so he took on the liberation of his people, trying to follow the Spirit in doing that. So liberation theology is an old concept. And in the old law, you frequently see conflict between priest and prophet. The priest is saying, this is how you kill the lamb, this is how you offer the lamb, this is the way you do the sacrifice, this is the ritual. And then the prophet comes along and says in contradiction, God doesn't care about your sacrifice. He wants justice to rain down. He wants mercy to rain down. Don't pay too much attention to your rituals. So conflict between what? Priest and prophet. The one conducting the liturgy and the one saying what really matters is love, justice, walk humbly before your God. Very interesting, and the conflict goes on. And today we want to see it somewhat within the context of the Catholic Church, of which I've been a part, but it actually applies to any religious background. In our situation in the Catholic Church, an old man was named to the papacy. He was 78 years of age, and he took the title John the 23rd. And everyone thought he would be a conservative and keep things as they were. And he becomes Pope, and the first thing he said was, you know, this church is really stuffy. Yeah, it's really stuffy in here. We're going to open some windows, and we're going to bring it up to date. And everyone was rather shocked, and he said, the only way to do this is to call a council. So the Second Vatican Council was called 1962 to 1965. All the bishops of the world were called to Rome, and every day of the council was another surprise. One day they said, you know, we shouldn't have been so tough on what Martin Luther did. He really brought a lot of good ideas out that we hadn't heard before. Before it had been an adversarial relationship with the Augustinian monk Martin Luther, who lived some 500 years before. What the council was trying to do was to see the positive things that had come up historically. And they said, you know, Luther did bring the the Bible into the vernacular more, bringing it into German and then into other languages, and all of this was very positive, and he did put a tremendous emphasis on conscience, which is very necessary. So then the church began to reflect on itself during these 3 years, and in that reflection there were some horror stories that they said, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how in 312 AD, the emperor became a Christian. Constantine became a Christian. And this was somewhat of a disaster. Why? Because he took the methodologies of empire and brought it in to the conduct of the church. He called a council of Nicaea. He paid the way for the bishops to come to the council. And the next thing we knew, Christianity was being spread with a sword. And this, of course, was not the intention of the founder, right? So it was important to reflect on what is called imperial theology. And that's the theology in which most of us, regardless of our religion, have been brought up. So we see Christianity going through Europe with the sword. You'll become a Christian or we'll break your face. Well, is that the message? You know? Well, it's really horrendous. So the council was reflecting on what it called the sins of the church. It said, look, we can't put this stuff under the rug. We have to acknowledge the fact that it wasn't only spreading Christianity with the sword. This was followed by crusades that were killing Islamic people and killing Jews and taking over Jerusalem by force. And this was not in the spirit of Jesus, which this whole thing began, when this whole thing began. So we're looking back on this and seeing many, many problems. I have a theory that Islam is a response to muscular Christianity. As you know, Islam came 6 centuries after Jesus. And I think one of the things that helped to create Islam was the military behavior of the church that led ultimately to the Crusades, killing thousands and thousands of people in the name of God. Looking back, they said, my goodness, this was followed by an Inquisition. The Inquisition was based on the principle that error has no rights. You are a Jew. You are wrong. We are right. So you can convert or die. Well, that's a great attitude, isn't it? Error has no rights. And of course, we can use torture to give you a chance to change your view. This went on for approximately 600 years. The Inquisition was present in this hemisphere. If you go to Mexico, go to the Museum of the Inquisition. It's extremely important because it was active during the time of the Mexican Revolution of 1810, when Father Morelos and Father Hidalgo, who became the fathers of Mexico, were called before the Inquisition. And the Inquisition was so accurate, of course it was being run by the Spanish, and what did they want to do? They wanted to break from Spain with the Grito de Dolores in 1810. They wanted to break from Spain, but the Spaniards were running the Inquisition, so they called the revolutionaries before the Inquisition, and Father Hidalgo was convicted of what? He was convicted of being an atheist, a Jew, and a Lutheran. Okay so far? The Inquisition was very accurate, as you can see. And that's what Inquisitions always are. And it's, I look at our own Inquisitions today that are going on in Cuba and elsewhere, Guantanamo, where people are being tortured to get something out of them. I think you'll get nothing out of them. Nobody has to tell the truth under torture. I hope nobody ever did. What for?